Well, Human Rights Watch has delivered its global report card for 2022. Its focus is on the need for democracies to flourish in the contest against autocracy. For Australia's part, though, the main issue is climate change policy, which has been included in the assessment for the first time. Let's bring in now Elaine Pearson, the Australian Director at Human Rights Watch. Elaine, appreciate your time. I know this is a global report, but let's start off with the Australian chapter. What are your key concerns? I mentioned climate change. Why was that included this time around?
Well, I think climate change was included because, the climate crisis is actually a dire threat to humankind. This is a human rights crisis. It represents threats to livelihood, to life, the right to health, the right to food, and we're seeing these impacts already in Australia. So I think, the failure of the Australian government to take ambitious action on climate change and the continuing subsidies that are going to the fossil fuel industry are really concerning. And, we want to see that there is, effective action on climate change. And this needs to be taken urgently. We can't wait till 2050. We need to see action now and a concrete plan, really to move away from fossil fuels and to reduce our dependence. And that's also important because our neighbouring countries are already bearing the brunt of climate change. They're seeing coastal erosion, people are having to get displaced and move from their homes. And so Australia really has a responsibility as one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases to take firm action to reduce its use of greenhouse gases.
Elaine, we have seen a real spotlight on Australia's immigration program over the past week or so via the Novak Djokovic saga. We're still waiting today to find out whether or not his visa will be cancelled. We have seen, though, that the tough on borders policy has got a lot of press coverage overseas in the last few days as a result. What sort of renewed pressure have we seen on the government when it comes to the plight of long-term refugees in this country? And in terms of the global report being released today, was much said on that front?
Well, this is the thing. Every year we put out this report and every year we call attention to Australia's shameful record on its treatment of asylum seekers and refugees. And, I have to say it's been more than 8 years that Australia introduced this policy of offshore processing. We have people who've been shunted around from one centre to another, from Manus Island to hotels in Melbourne for 8 years now. And, we understand that this was all about deterrence. But at the end of the day, these are people's lives. And you've got hundreds of people who remain in this situation. They've been found by the PNG or the Nauruan government to be refugees. So I think the question is, why can't the government do something to at least alleviate the plight of these people who are already in the country?
When you look at Australia compared to some of the other countries around the world often accused of human rights abuses, who are the worst culprits? What do you sort of rank as the biggest human rights issues the globe is facing at the moment?
Yeah, so our report doesn't actually rank countries because we feel like, all countries have their own human rights abuses, but, certainly in terms of crimes against humanity, we have in the past year drawn attention to China and its treatment, particularly of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, the deteriorating situation of democracy in Hong Kong. We've also drawn attention to the decline of democracy in India and the extent to which minorities have, been, faced oppression. Afghanistan, obviously, in the past year, we've seen the return of the Taliban, and now Afghan people, particularly women, are really facing, very severe repression of their rights. And in Myanmar, it will be 1 year since the military coup, which took place on February 1st last year. So even within our region, there are some really concerning areas where we are seeing, atrocities being committed really with impunity.
Elaine Pearson, there would be plenty to get into on all of those topics. We are out of time. I do appreciate you joining us to bring us the latest from that global report today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ash.